Apple. Its earnings coming up after the bell today. The world's largest tech company expected to earn $5.39 a share on revenues of $23.4 billion. By the way, both of those are gains of more than 60% year over year. Mark Demas is a portfolio manager for the large cap growth strategies team at Fifth Third Asset Management. The firm has $17 billion under management overall, owns more than 240,000 shares of Apple. Mark is joining us from his firm in Minneapolis. Mark, thanks so much for coming in to talk to us. You know,
Thank you.
As I mentioned, it's not sort of the usual really excited feeling about Apple's numbers coming out. There are a couple of areas where people are asking some questions. I want to talk about margins, first of all. There are some concerns that component costs are going up, just like costs are going up for everybody. How much of an issue do you think this is going to be for Apple in the margins?
I think that if you look at this quarter, I think the margins are going to be less of an issue because you have a positive mix with iPhone units being up substantially, and that drives a better mix for Apple. I think where investors are more concerned is in Apple's guidance for the next couple of quarters, and where potentially higher component costs and how that could impact gross margins. But I think this quarter they probably will be okay.
And what do you think about for the rest of the year? Do you think that it is going to be a problem?
Well, certainly, I think if you look at Apple in the quarter, certainly expectations are high. They're always high for Apple. I think you need to differentiate between a couple of things with Apple. One is just transitory issues, launch dates, supply chain issues, getting components. Those are more very short-term issues with Apple that I think people, with expectations so high, they're going to worry about short-term. But the real thing to worry about with Apple is end demand for the products. And we think that's where, that's part of the story is going to be fine. And we'll see that as we move through the rest of the year with the iPhone and the iPad continuing to ramp through the end of the year.
What about end demand in Japan? I saw one estimate today that Japan makes up about 6% of Apple's revenue, and that even if the country quickly begins to rebuild, that it still might affect consumer sentiment for some time to come.
Yeah, it is going to be an issue. I think that it'll impact the quarter by a very small amount. But again, that whole situation is going to be reflected in Apple's guidance, and I think that that's kind of what investors are worried about. Is they typically give conservative guidance anyway. With some of the issues that are around there, Apple may be a little bit more conservative. But again, I think that if you take a step back, a lot of those issues are pretty transitory, and that the end demand for their products is still going to be very good.
I want to ask about the iPad specifically. That's because there was a little bit of buzz yesterday. Some folks did some digging into the lawsuit that Apple recently filed against Samsung over tablets, and Apple seemed to give some iPad numbers for the quarter in that lawsuit that were lower than analysts expected. What's your read on that situation?
Yeah, I think there was question on that, and whether that included iPad 1 or iPad 1 and the second launch of the iPad. And I think that probably only includes iPad 1. And so, obviously Apple launched the iPad 2. They've been supply constrained, and so I think that the result there will be fine. But I think that clearly what you've seen with iPad demand in the U.S., they're launching it internationally. It's potentially going to penetrate the corporate enterprise here in the States. I don't think there's any question that iPad demand over the next, call it, year is going to be very good. It's just a matter of, does Apple get a 50% share of this market, or are they going to get 80% share of that market?
Mark, thank you so much for talking to us. We look forward to those numbers after the bell. Mark Demas of Fifth Third Asset Management, and Apple shareholder, talking to us about those numbers.